about who is Tommy Robinson. As we said there, his real name, Stephen Yaxley Lennon. Why did he change his name? What does he do? Why is he notorious?
Well, firstly, I have to correct you. I'm not a supporter of him.
King Charles III delivered a rare address to Canada's Parliament yesterday, and the speech, prepared by Prime Minister Mark Carney's office, described the nation facing a critical moment.
I'm somebody who I think understands the background to what's gone on here. If you think this is a young guy from Luton who originally went to the return home of the Anglian Regiment from Afghanistan and saw Anjam Chowdhury and his group of nutters.
And Ian Austin, you remember him. He's a Canada correspondent for the New York Times, spoke with us at about this time yesterday. Ian, great to have you with us, and you predicted that this speech would hit a...
One simple social media comment. That's all it took to turn Lucy Connolly's life upside down. A mother jailed for 31 months over a tweet. But then something unthinkable happened. King Charles intervened. What drove the king to act in this way? You need to hear this story. Like, what if your social media posts cost you your freedom? This is real-life UK events, not a TV show. A setting where opposing views might lead to jail time, influencing public conversation. Free speech, once considered an inviolable democratic value, is today a polarising national issue. And the most shocking, cases that emphasise this issue. Arrest Lucy Connolly. Over 4 years ago, a tweet transformed her life. Despite not being violent or combustible, authorities called it offensive content. She was imprisoned for 31 months for an old internet remark. Critics worry that her narrative, which stunned the public, could expose other long-forgotten tweets, posts or comments and result in the same punishments. Connolly went from a regular citizen to a key actor in the argument against increased governmental censorship in Britain. Dissenting on public platforms is becoming perilous. Thus, her 31-month sentence is a warning. Not simply anonymous social media users are at risk. Tommy Robinson's condition is similar, yet worrisome. Robinson, whose contentious public image has long divided the nation, was caught up in it again. After his detention and charges for what supporters called a broad online campaigning violation, his case has reignited debates over lawful expression.
Burning poppies and shouting abuse at them. And the police on that occasion were completely unwilling to act, as Tommy Robinson says. And so actually, you know, time and time again, I think that Tommy Robinson and his movement actually is against the fact that we live in a politically correct society.
Tone as it was prepared by the Prime Minister's office, but I'm curious if anything stood out to you from what we all heard.
Where the police and the establishment are not willing to take action against people where they behave in an offensive and obnoxious manner.
And Nick, that is the thing. It's not that everything he says...
Well, I think it was... the tone was perhaps a bit stronger than people expected. I mean, he didn't mention President Trump by name, but he constantly spoke.
Although Robinson has legal experience, this situation feels unique. Many of his fans say his detention is a sign of how the British justice system treats politically inconvenient views. Whether Robinson is a campaigner or a provocateur, his situation raises the crucial and long overdue question of where free speech and hate speech meet. Randomly choosing the boundaries is scarier. When hearing about Connolly or Robinson's situations, people naturally compare. How do these tales affect justice in modern Britain? Examine recent examples of online content, many would argue beyond offensive, having drastically diverse, often less severe effects. Posts inciting minority violence often receive warnings or penalties rather than arrests. This disparity is seen as hypocrisy by many. Why is a single tweet punishable by almost 3 years in prison, yet public safety concerns are allowed? Not speculation, but facts show the gap. In 2022, social media-related arrests in the UK exceeded 3,300, worrying civil rights campaigners. The huge variations in sentencing trends across these cases suggest that fairness is being threatened rather than justice. Naturally, people are asking questions. Social media is full of views, from condemning totalitarian overreach to supporting these strict laws as a necessary evil to maintain peace. A national identity crisis is centered on free expression. Much discussion exposes a wider issue than the afflicted persons. Legal interpretations are not unique. They represent a greater trend in public discourse regulation. In addition to punishing, courts send messages. Be careful what you say has been the message lately. Skepticism regarding this development is growing. Analysts see a rocky path to authoritarianism. Critics say governments that claim to protect citizens from hazardous speech sometimes stifle speech. Is it to protect communities or the powerful from unpopular views? This nagging fear has now reached the monarchy, which is novel and problematic. Then King Charles appears unexpectedly. The king intervened as government overreach and free speech disputes reach new heights. His His involvement in such politically sensitive subjects is unusual, but his voice is customary. Opposition to the judicial system in a constitutional monarchy creates a new story nobody expected. What is Charles doing to upset this balance? Then things get even more shocking. Why would the King of England intervene in free speech arrests? It's an unexpected but well-planned move that shows that even though the monarchy is primarily symbolic in modern Britain, it may still intervene. According to speculations, King Charles has taken an unusual and brazen step away from his usual apolitical position by challenging the Labour government's internet speech policies. Charles rarely criticised.
My concern is that he's being seen as the champion of the British working classes, and the working classes that I know do not necessarily share his views.
How then are Canadians reacting to this? Because for a while you had a faction of the population who you wouldn't consider royalists. You'd consider them people who would be looking for Canada to move away.
To a pub, they will accept that if they need hospital treatment or their wives or husbands need hospital treatment, there's every possibility they're going to be looked after by someone who was not born in this country, does not share the same faith they may be.
Well, I think, people, I don't think he converted people to becoming royalists, but there were, I've covered previous tours by then Prince Charles, and there's
government decisions during his reign and before that as Prince of Wales. This deviation from tradition suggests something special is happening. The King's claimed review of Tommy Robinson and Lucy Connolly's arrests is uncommon and raises concerns. In a monarchy parliamentary democracy, such activities are especially insulting. Charles was deeply disturbed by the trend of jailing citizens for offensive speech, insiders said. One source reported that this concern led to a muted request to the cabinet to cease the persecution or face constitutional consequences. Kingly speech is rarely linked to domestic policy disputes, even in private. Apparently, he did more than say things. Tommy Robinson's decreased sentence may be due to the King's delicate but decisive interference. Even Robinson's adversaries have questioned the harshness of his latest court sanctions. Despite his contentious words and public campaigns, Charles expressly requested Robinson's sentence be re-evaluated, which was done immediately, according to sources. It boosted free speech despite its far-reaching effect. It raised questions about Robinson's sentence and whether any British citizen, prominent or not, would feel safe speaking out without fear of repercussions. Lucy Connolly, who was imprisoned for 31 months for an outdated tweet, was seen as an example of abuse of the law. Years later, Connolly's tweet, which had been withdrawn with an apology, was deemed to warrant a severe prison sentence. Opponents of free speech legislation criticised her case as government overreach, but nothing changed until the King took notice. The widely reported Connolly story has been compared to a two-tiered legal system. These laws often claim to protect communities from damaging or hostile speech, but they seem to be applied differently depending on the person or organisation. By raising concerns about Connolly's situation, the King has unintentionally raised awareness of the system's hypocrisies. This action could cause government-monarchy conflict, which is intriguing. British monarchs rarely disagree with elected authorities on policy. King Charles looks to be testing those bounds. After being rattled by the King's interference, Labour ministers are rethinking speech arrests, reports say. Some sources report a political firestorm in Labour's ranks, with ministers desperately seeking to quell a growing public outcry. If the monarchy's hostility to the government's legal orientation wasn't enough, the public's reaction to the King's activities is worse. Some have condemned him for exceeding his constitutional authority, but many have praised his action as necessary and long overdue. Despite concerns about Britain's shaky power structure, King Charles' extraordinary engagement has brought the entire system under investigation. The monarchy has typically taken a ceremonial role in politics due to decades of custom and accords that value neutrality. This idea underpins constitutional monarchy. Charles's influence goes beyond symbolism.
Nick, he believes that mainstream media does not represent him.
And this would be, Eamon, the mainstream media that actually, in the case of the Times newspaper, broke.
Well, I can't read the mind of the president. His only response was to put up another 51st State tweet last night, and it wasn't clearly a response to
that child grooming scandal, and as a result of it, it became Newspaper of the Year, and the journalist became Journalist of the Year. This would be the mainstream media.
To the visit. I think this was mostly a visit, mostly a speech for domestic consumption to sort of improve the morale of Canadians, whether it will have any effect.
Although controversial, his actions recall a time when kings directly affected national affairs. Free expression conflict has far-reaching repercussions beyond court hearings and legal discourse. It fundamentally defines Britain's democracy and the monarchy's role. One interpretation of King's participation is public unhappiness with government overreach. By acting in cases that have incited outrage, Charles may be presenting himself as a champion of the people, a role established by centuries of royal tradition. His efforts may be problematic since they mix direct activism with constitutional. However, it is effective, forcing Labour ministers to assess popular dissatisfaction. Overall, this is about more than King Charles, Lucy Connolly and Tommy Robinson. British government dynamics are evolving. When the king publicly criticises elected leaders, the monarchy's relevance in the 21st century is questioned. Charles's calm yet defiant response suggests the status quo may be more unstable than it seems. Since justice and public confidence are at stake, what happens next may affect Britain's future in ways we're not ready for. The king's intervention challenges Britain's free speech policy and re-examines the monarchy's position in politics. After Charles reportedly condemned Labour's online dissent crackdown, the government is trying to contain the fallout. According to internal briefings, ministers are terrified that this might shift public opinion and damage their free speech legislation. However, does this preserve rights or increase ideological differences? Kingly intervention in policy disputes is undoubtedly ongoing. Watch out.